And Ray, you've taken attendance, and it appears as though we've got a quorum for the meeting. First up is, before we go any further, before we go into public comment, I was hoping that we might have a motion to allow Commissioner Stan Gozar to attend virtually and be able to meet. Thank you, Bart. Second. Thank you, John. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
If I may just for the record, because for the new list, exemption.
Oh, okay. So be it noted that this is for illness, that Stan is not with us today, and we're allowed under the Open Meeting Act to allow him to attend virtually. So with that caveat, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay. Welcome, Stan, officially. On to public comment, there is none.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And the consent agenda, does any of the commissioners wish to have any of the items under the consent agenda removed for further discussion? If not, I entertain a motion to approve.
Motion.
Thank you, Ron. Second. Thank you, Roy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Consent agenda passes, and we're now under the regular agenda. First up, we have a presentation from Billy Titus, who's the Deputy City Manager of Bloomington, and he's going to share with us a presentation that I think some of us may have seen a while back, but it's on the Downtown Bloomington Landscape Project. Billy, turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair and members. I appreciate you all, first of all, having me today. I'm very personally glad as well.
You're welcome.
Really, this is a project that we're really excited about, and I feel like I've used that word ad nauseum over the last several months related to this. About in August of 2022, after a couple of months of conversations, our city council voted to approve a design contract with a team to design what is going to be known as the Bloomington Downtown Streetscape Project. Now, I would guess that streetscape can mean a million different things to all of us based on what we've seen. Really, what that is it's a project designed to bring a new look and feel and energy, new lights, new landscaping, new paving, new sidewalks to our downtown. We're looking to do things like create public spaces that give people more of a reason to come downtown when they're not shopping or dining. We want them to be able to come down and recreate and do other things, read a book or do other things with their families. We want to create a space and spaces downtown that are driven more by pedestrians and people and less by cars, where they're more walkable, the sidewalks are wider, and we're just giving people, we're basing the design on people versus cars. So again, in August of 2022, the council approved a design contract with CMT and Massey Associates and others that are part of a team that really for the last year and change have been working on this project. And so if you go to the next slide, please.
Whoa, sorry. There we go.
And so when you talk about streetscape, often people think beautification and they think, nice new things, but it's about more than that. There's a financial component to a project like this as well, where as you can see, we're hoping that these kinds of things happen. We're more than hoping. We've seen that happen in other communities, frankly, where it spurs private development. Once you start to, as a community, quote unquote, put your money where your mouth is and reinvest in your downtown areas. Communities have seen other companies come in and say, hey, you've done this. I'm interested in locating a business here as well. Literally, in the community that I came from, we did a streetscape project. And we heard from companies, including a Fortune 50 company that said, if you're planning to do this, we're going to look to locate some of our buildings here. And we did, and they did. So there's more than anecdotal evidence that this happens. So there is a financial growth component to a project like this as well. Next slide, please. When you talk about some of the things that a streetscape project can do, you can read the slide, but they tend to lead to, based on studies, actual studies, higher employment levels. Again, new businesses, as I said, higher property values. Investment begets investment. And when people see that you're doing things, they want to be there, and they tend to spend money to grow their businesses there as well. So again, it's about more than lights and landscaping. Next slide, please. The process. So what has been happening over the last year and a half? You know, I think there was a lot of buzz at the beginning, and then the last year and a half until recently, it's been quieter, because what was happening is that there was a lot of behind the scenes work going on, where there were lots of meetings with community groups, advocacy groups. We've met with groups from you know, persons with disabilities advocacy groups to IDOT, lots of meetings with IDOT. And well, anyway, yeah, with IDOT, we've done work like performing traffic analyses and things like that as well. It's really trying to go from this concept of streetscape to what can we actually do based on what we were hearing from people, from groups and individuals, but also on things like what would IDOT allow, or, you know, based on our current state of infrastructure. One of the things we've been doing is reviewing underground infrastructure, because we don't want to go in and build something and have to tear it up in 5 years because there's a problem sewer. So we've been doing that kind of work. In October of last year, now 2023, I'll go back. One of the other things that we've had is a lot of conversations about parking. Downtown parking tends to be a regular topic for conversation. So we've been having conversations about, in these designs, what role, how big of a role should parking play in our downtown? Lots of things that we've been talking about. So fast forward to October of 2023. And if you would advance the slide, please. To October of 2023, we took that information, and the consulting team had put together a series of designs based on what we had found out. We held a public meeting at the BCPA and stood up a website that was downtownforeveryone.com. We've had a steering committee that we've been talking to about this during the process, but they were a part of these conversations as well. We wanted to gather input on the narrow design concepts that we had been put together. And I'm pleased to say, honestly, that we got a lot of input. The Downtown for Everyone website, we had 10,000 people open that, or 10,000 openings of that website. I won't say it's 10,000 individual people, but 10,000 openings of that website. We had 2,500 people who were actively engaged on the site. We're able to tell that they spent at least 10 seconds on the site. It may not seem like a lot, but it means they didn't just open and close it. They actually saw some of the things that were on the site. We had 300 plus people who actually voted on concepts as part of this project. Now, you all are involved with government. I'm sure you know that it's hard to get people to participate and give public input. So we were pleased, we have been pleased with those numbers, and we're continuing to gather input. There'll be another public input meeting on the 13th, which is next week. In any event, what we did was that we said we didn't want to just throw things out and say, hey, what do you think? We asked really two general categories of questions. One was, in terms of design, are you more interested in a design that strictly improves walkability and doesn't consider necessarily parking as a priority? Are you more interested in maintaining the current level of parking and not necessarily considering walkability? Or do you want more of a hybrid? And we presented designs for that. The second question was more philosophical, and that was, what's your design style? Are you more of a person who prefers something that's more contemporary and modern? Do you prefer something that's more classic and traditional? Or again, do you prefer a hybrid? And you can see the designs at the top, and then examples of those different types of design styles at the bottom. And what we heard, and in my mind at least, surprisingly, because I assumed most people would want to just maintain parking, was that most folks wanted a hybrid in both categories. If you could go to the next slide, please. And the vote totals based on what we saw was that in terms of the street section where we talk about more parking, more walkable, et cetera, 50-some-odd% preferred the middle of the road. And then street style, again, it was a mix. They wanted to see a hybrid. So based on that input, what our design team has done is narrowed even more, sort of where we're headed. And they're putting together a plan, a formal plan, based on what we're finding out that will be considered by the city council in hopefully March of this year, so next month. And then if approved, we would move forward with a first project. And so based on that input, our design team did in fact put together some conceptual designs that we'll be able to show you today. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. Again, as we talk about that more of a hybrid design, that considers everything from how parking is laid out to the colors of materials, to the types of landscaping, to a number of the types of lighting, et cetera, et cetera. What we're landing on in terms of the brick pavement is more of the black and red-ish colors combined with a gray perhaps for the crosswalks. Again, you'll see that there are more wider sidewalks that allow for more walkable spaces, but also outdoor dining that are not having to be contained in those temporary barriers that we currently have. You know, that was out of necessity, but we're going to be creating spaces where you can actually do this and be comfortable in doing it. Next slide, please. A wider view of what we're headed towards to be considered is, again, a roadway where the sidewalks are wider. There's appropriate parking. The drivable lane, right now I think there's 2 or 3 lanes along Main Street as an example. I think there's 2 or 3. But we would create the 1 lane, we would have the parking lane, but also a flex lane that is more designed for people who are bikers. We have an active biking community here, but also for deliveries and garbage disposal. One of the things we hear from downtown businesses is that they struggle with how we handle deliveries. And so what if we create a flex lane where we allow for that? Now there will be some programming required where we say between this hour and this hour, you can do it, but we create a space for that to occur to address that need. Next slide, please. That's a wider view of one of the things I just showed you. When we talk about the walkways, they would be more of a concrete in design. And again, additional landscaping, new lighting, you can see the signage for the flex lane, et cetera, et cetera. And so based on the public input we've gotten, in terms of the street design, that's where we're headed as a proposal. The next slide, please. In addition to the street design, there have also been concepts put together for the Museum Square. Obviously, it's a focal point for our downtown. It's a place that a lot of people know best. And it's a great space. But what can we do to enhance what's already there, to create more reasons for people to come downtown, both to visit the museum, but also to do other things? And so as part of this design, our group has done drawings and designs for, you know, what can happen on each side of this space. And that's just sort of an overview there, but next slide, please. So on one side, there's obviously the same design for the pavers and the sidewalk and allowing for outdoor dining and outdoor sitting and congregating. And again, redesigning the parking on the side of the building in line with what is being proposed for the rest of the downtown. But next slide, please. But what if on this side, we also allowed for video projection where we allow for people to come down and congregate and see, you know, during different seasons, you could have different video projection presentations. So maybe during Christmas, it's more of a Christmas presentation. You know, we are the land of Lincoln. And so, you know, there could be Lincoln presentations, other historical presentations. So creating a system here where you could do video presentations on the side of the building. They do this in other places, including Disney, and they can be magnificent, like they really, really can. And the museum and the county, obviously, would have the ability to determine what those presentations were. So being proposed for this side of the building is both the street design, but also the video presentation, and which we're excited about. The next side, on the north side, we already regularly have concerts on the square, but there is also a market for having maybe a smaller space where people and performers can come and plug and play. Creating a space on the north side where you can come in and plug in instruments or microphones and not have to run wires and do all of that. It's already ready to go. So on the north side, having a space where you could do that kind of thing And one of the things I get excited about here, frankly, is movies on the square, where perhaps you have a video screen here where you can do movies here and during the spring and summer where people come and see movies, things like that. So that proposed for the north side. Next slide, please. And the reason I say draft update here is when we started the conversation about the west side of the building, we originally were looking towards a fountain, doing fountain and a water feature, which we were really excited about. But because we have engaged the museum and others, there were concerns about having water there. One, with no place for people to go and dry off. Two, there are some very valuable materials in the museum, and there was concern about people leaving the water feature and going in the museum and ruining materials, et cetera, et cetera. So we are revisiting that side of the building where perhaps we do something that's something like interactive checkerboard and chessboard. Or in other communities, what you see are things like the more solid concrete foosball tables or things like that, where people can come down, parent can sit on a planner and read a book, while kids can play games that are more permanently affixed, that give people another reason to come downtown. So on this side of the building, we're having conversations about something different than the water feature, frankly. We have talked to the museum. In the past, we talked to the county property committee, and I may have misstated the name of the committee, about the water feature and some of these other things, but we'll have to go back to them to say, hey, we're revisiting this side of the building because there were concerns about the fountain. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, that's the same place at night, which is kind of cool. It can light up. On the south side of the building, we all know that right now the south side of the building struggles, frankly, in terms of being welcoming to people or saying this is the entrance to the museum. So there have been designs, I'll back up. The museum had been working with it, had been working with an architect to do designs for this side of the building. Unfortunately, the designs are very, very costly, and it becomes a situation where how do you raise the money to do what they had planned to do? So we came back and said, hey, we're willing to work with you and perhaps do something at the south side of the building as well. That would build upon what you've already done. And so they were open to that. So we presented designs for the south side of the building as well that both create a more appropriate space for buses to load and unload, which right now they really don't have, that builds upon the awning type of design that they had already proposed, but also creates spaces for public art, et cetera, and is really, in our opinion, more welcoming. We've given this to the museum. They are reviewing it. Preliminarily, they really like it. Again, there would have to be a conversation with the county because the county owns the building, but as proposed for the south side. Next slide, please. Let me back up. Sorry. Good. Are there any questions so far on what I've talked about? Okay. And so we've talked about the core. We've talked about the museum square. There are also proposals for other spaces within the downtown area, not necessarily all in the core. And this, we are over the moon about. And in part because right now, this is the space near the Brass Pig on North Main, near the north end of that street. Right now, it's parking space and really a thoroughfare for cars. I mean, it's not, other than that, it's not really usable. What if we could create a space that still served as parking space, but that we could also use for other things? Perhaps some of the businesses on this end wanted to hold events. Perhaps it becomes a space where you could hold bags tournament or do other things. So what if we design this space to be used for something more than parking? That is being proposed as well, both in terms of having the pavers and delineating spaces, but also sort of a public art space where the ring around there that really clearly identifies and defines this space. Now, what that would look like exactly, we haven't gotten that far, but as a concept, this is being proposed and we really, really like it. Again, obviously some other landscaping and beautification treatments that would happen here as well. Next slide, please. So again, another view where, on the sides of the space, instead of just concrete sidewalks, you could have tiered spaces where people could come and sit and have lunch. They could go to a lunch, go to the Brass Pig, go somewhere else and grab lunch and sit on those spaces and have lunch while other things are happening in the space. Next slide, please. Another view. I talked about bags terminal or other things. If you're not a bags fan, I mean, you can do a number of different things in that space. Again, the ring is something that could be lighted as concept. Next slide. And again, another view coming from the south to the north. The concept is to block off that entrance, not block it, but narrow it so the cars could still get in and out, but it's not just a place where cars are coming. So, next slide. Moving on to the BCPA. The lawn space in front of that building there's opportunities there to do more than what's there. Everything from additional landscaping to public art. You know, the red dots in concept are possibilities for public art. You could also, because it's open, you could do concerts on the lawn where perhaps in the parking space, you have the concerts in that where that middle dot is, and you have people, you know, in the parking area where they could park elsewhere. In concept, again, stand up if you don't mind. Perhaps rerouting and allowing for a throughfare here so that vehicular traffic didn't have to do this and they could come here instead of doing this and this. It aligns better. It's safer for pedestrians in terms of right now, a lot of times people are coming here and they're crossing in the middle of the street. What if we created a better intersection and better align the street here where cars could go in and out in a better way and people could cross in a better way? Now, I want to say to you all, this of everything we've talked about so far is the one where everything is not necessarily in our hands and that there would perhaps be a need for some property acquisition. And in here especially, not for here, but in here especially, and over here. And so if the property owners would allow or would be willing to sell some of the property, that is what would allow for some of the design that happens here. So I want to be clear, this isn't a quote unquote done deal even if the plan is approved, this part, because there are some other conversations that have to happen with property owners. So, next slide, please. And again, really just more conceptual in other areas. As you enter the downtown, what if we could do a better job, or I won't say better job, what if we could do more with the existing green space? What if we had opportunities for more public art, perhaps a Route 66 statue or something at the entrance here, or other public art that really told people you're entering downtown Bloomington. So conceptually, you know, we don't have the more up-to-date renderings on these yet, but conceptually. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
One more back, please. If you're headed into the downtown from the north, right now we've got the overhead awnings going into the downtown, but honestly, if you're going around downtown, that area could use some beautification. What if we could do some things to really beautify the area that you see on the slide here to again say to people, you're entering a special place. You are. And this is a place you want to go. So, next slide. In terms of phasing, that's one of the things that we're discussing as well. And this is really preliminary, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it. Where we're heading, if this plan is approved, is for the Main Street corridor to be the first project. And that's here. And in large part because it's a bigger project. It allows for us to spotlight sort of what this could look like. It perhaps builds momentum for the other things and says, hey, this is what this can be. It does accomplishes a lot of things, like the things I just said, but also it gets North Main done, that activity center as well. And again, it builds momentum for some of the other phases. This isn't in stone, but we're heading towards recommending that as a first project, but the others to follow. The other thing we need to make sure of is that if this is approved, we're phasing things in such a way that we don't tear up all of downtown and create problems for businesses. So some of those thoughts have also gone into what is perhaps being proposed here. Next slide, please. Finally, Mike Sewell from CMT is our point. He's our project manager. He's done a fantastic job. And again, as I mentioned earlier, another community open house, February 13th. You'll see a lot of this, honestly, and perhaps some more specific drawings. And we really are still seeking input. If you're interested in seeing some of these drawings, you can go to downtownforeveryone.com. I think it's a really, really good website and a good place sort of to see what we're doing and where we're headed. Take any questions if you got any.
Questions for Billy? Comments? Impressions?
Question for you. I apologize if this is beyond the scope of where you guys are with the planning for this. Might be getting ahead a little bit, but has there been any consideration as far as like impacts on rents for small businesses that are in the downtown area? Rents, yes, like for the actual cost of the business remaining in downtown, not just the increased revenue that they would have, or any kind of like changes to cost of living for the downtown area and the surrounding area?
I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. So are you saying that if we do this, are there concerns, my word, not yours, about rents going up and making it
Untenable for like small businesses?
We actually have had that conversation, and it is built into some of the things that we're talking about. One of the things we also want to make sure that we do is as we talk about how we finance this project, be that through the use of TIF districts or special business districts, et cetera, is also creating programs for downtown businesses that will allow for us potentially to, one, make improvements to their businesses through the use of some of those programs where we're giving them money to improve their projects. But two, perhaps there can be rent assistance programs as part of the programming we create. So yes, it is something that we've talked about. We don't have any plans in place as of yet, but those will be things that we know that we're going to have to put in.
Okay, that was my concern.
It's a good question. It's a very good question.
Other comments, questions for Billy?
I noticed that in every design, there was very precise consideration for bike paths.
Okay.
What was the driver for that?
Several things, and I won't get them all. One was the fact that we have a very active biking community. We wanted to make sure that we were supportive of that. Also, that we want to try as best we can to get bikers through the downtown. So we want to make sure that we are supportive of that. One of the other things is that when you're creating and bikers aren't pedestrians, I get that. When you're creating a downtown that, in our opinion at least, that is less driven by vehicles, we do want to encourage multimodal transportation through the downtown, and bikes make up, in our opinion, and based on what we heard from people, a big part of that. The bikers, from what we heard, want to be able to ride their bikes downtown safely as well. And there are other reasons that I don't have right now, but we were trying to be supportive of bikers and encouraging people to bike through our downtown. And I know that, I believe that the state will also, coming soon, will be doing their project around the downtown, where they'll be reducing the street from 4 lanes to 3 and creating a bike lane. And we encourage that. We really, actually, we wanted to go to 2 lanes, but IDOT wouldn't let us. But my point being,
my thing was in looking at the design and understanding that the state's going to do what they're doing. That already brings bikers to the area. And we also are using a lot of valuable space to allow them to move within the area on their bikes. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So have they considered, okay, we're going to bring bikers to this space, then they can park their bikes and walk.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Because if they're in the design, I see a lot of real estate being used in the, around the square for bike paths.
Are you able to go back to, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
As a destination, not just transitory.
Absolutely. And the one thing that, can you go back?
Hold on, I'm gonna share it so
Start
people
going.
online. All right.
Which one do I want? The one with the flex lane picture, like one of the early ones. Yeah. That one. Perfect. So one of the things you don't see in here, or that I didn't talk about, is at some point we will get to a very narrow design of what this is going to look like. So one of the conversations one of the things we're still working through is what are the furnishings going to be downtown? Be that garbage cans, what the benches will actually look like, and to be sure, bike racks. They will be an integral part of what we're doing here. So there will be places for people to park their bikes. That's a part of what we're working through now. You won't see that on these drawings because we haven't gotten that far. But two, to your point about the state doing the bike lane and getting people to the area, we don't want them to just go around downtown. We want them to come into the downtown, have a place to ride, pull off, and park their bikes. So these are so that when they're riding on the state route, perhaps, or coming from another area, they have a comfortable space where they can come in and ride, but also, to your point, have a space where they can pull over and park. So that is all a part of this. I didn't talk about the furnishings part of this, all of this, but that is one of the things we're also doing as well, figuring out what those things are going to look like. But there will for sure be places for bikes to park in. Sure. Did I get clear?
Yeah, yeah, I'm just challenging the amount of space that's being used for that, because on every street, it's on every street, not just, because I've seen this done in Amsterdam and other places, and they bring the bike where lots of people bike. Okay. And they bring the bikes to the space, but then they give them racks where they can park their bikes, and then they go walk, and they walk from that point, and it allows them for that space to park or have service vehicles arrive a little easier and a little safer, but it allows for additional parking. So that's that hybrid.
Yeah.
Because when I like the hybrid idea, but in the design, I saw there was it's like, okay, there's no question, bikes are going to be everywhere. We're making accommodations for bikes everywhere on every street. If you go back one or two slides, where the overview there. So you can see you've got bike lanes all four sides of the square. So
there are, please no, your point is well taken.
Yeah.
And you're right.
yeah,
There are, on this drawing at least, there are not bike lanes here and here. And there are not, I don't think there are, and I don't have it in front of me, I don't think there are bike lanes on the east-west streets. It's more on the north-south
okay.
streets.
So it's only in
This is parking. This is bus loading and unloading.
Oh, okay.
Parking.
Got it.
And the other thing I will mention is that the discussion is about bollards here, so you can block these spaces from.
Oh, okay. So that's fine then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
That's good.
Cool.
Good question.
Other questions? Billy, before we let him go? Billy, this is exciting. As someone who's worked with downtown for about 20 years, seeing some of the things that are being proposed tick off a lot of boxes in many ways. So
I would agree with that.
it's a good thing to see it happen. So
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I know it's going to happen no matter what we say.
yeah, that's true. True. Thank you, Billy. Appreciate your time.
Have a good day.
You too.
Good. All right. On to Mark and the Regional Housing Initiative. Mark?
So I have a very brief formal written update, and then I have a 5 to 7 minute slide deck to kind of go through as well. So MCRPC staff coordinated a listening session with the Illinois Housing Development Authority, or IDA, as you might know it. A listening session with McLean County stakeholders was held back on January 18th. MCRPC staff provided a zoning presentation to the Illinois Realtors Association at their Affordable Housing and Economic Development meeting back on January 23rd. MCRPC staff facilitated the Regional Housing Initiative Housing Staff meeting back on January 25th. Currently working on our housing data collection for the housing data dashboard update. And then we also provided a presentation on affordable housing needs in McLean County at the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council Real Estate Summit back on January 25th. In terms of regional housing recovery plan updates, a couple brief updates, and then I'll move on to the presentation. As part of our public engagement efforts, we hosted a public forum on housing needs back on January 9th. The event drew about 85 attendees in person, 24 over Zoom as well, as we had a hybrid format for that event. We also supported the stakeholder workshops that consultants TPMA, who are doing the crafting of the regional housing recovery plan. We helped them with facilitating the 2 stakeholder workshops back on January 9th and 10th. So January was very busy for us. 14 stakeholders attended the first workshop there and 13 attended the second. We had different sectors from healthcare providers like Carl Broman, OSF. We also had Connect Transit, Bloomington Housing Authority. So a really nice diversity of stakeholders attended. And then we had our steering committee meeting. We had 2 of them in the month of January 4th and January 30th. And we discussed key findings from ACS data recently released and input received from the stakeholder workshop and public forum, which you're going to see some of the data that the steering committee was presented and discussed, what would be 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to kind of dive into those findings. Any questions thus far?
Just a comment, don't remember the exact date, but there was a really nice WGLT article on one of the summits that you had. Which you were
Probably the real estate summit, yeah.
Good coverage. You don't always get.
All right, so we don't have a clicker. That's okay. I'll just
Use
tell
a
you next
mouse.
slide. So go ahead, next slide. So you're just going to see some pictures. So we're going to start off with the stakeholder workshops. Again, the purpose of this was to gather different sectors to contribute on a higher level. What are some goals that the plan should recommend? What are we trying to strive for? So these are stakeholders that have either directly or indirectly contributed to or work in the affordable housing market rate or nonprofit sector. But again, we have some different industries involved here. So this is from the first stakeholder workshop, and then you can move to the second one. And then this was the following day. It was 2 different workshops, but they were the same. So just giving people the option of a morning versus an evening, if you will, or vice versa. So this is from the second one on January 10th. You can see here individuals were basically prompted to list some goals that they want to see. What do they want to see related to housing projects moving forward in the community. And so they would write their notes on sticky notes. We basically would kind of over the next hour hash out and refine those goals so that they're more attainable and specific. And so you can see everyone collaborating here. It was interesting because the first one, we had more small group discussions between 3 and 4 people. Everyone was kind of in their own corners. And the second day, the group there actually worked together as a large group. So it was interesting to see some of the dynamics. So the first day, the large stakeholder workshop goal was at least one amazing mixed income, mixed housing style residential development in a location accessible by or near a bus and or trail. So you can see there, again, a transit orientation there. And then the second goal was additional low and moderate income level housing with transportation and permanent supportive housing. So again, the great thing about this is you can see organically without one group knowing what the other group said, just making sure that it's accessible via transit and not out in Timbuktu, if you will, that it's accessible and that we're also promoting some more affordable housing types like permanent supportive. Some barriers are identified in the stakeholder workshop. So sure everyone is familiar with what NIMBYism is, just stands for not my backyard mentality, developer experience and willingness to build, cultural barriers and or misconceptions, lack of incentives, that's specifically for developers, for landlords, and lack of commitment and follow through from community leadership. So when we're saying something, we're doing it kind of thing. So yeah. Potential action steps identified by our stakeholders that participated. And again, this one and the last one is coded together. So there is actually a lot of overlap. Incentives for developers and landlords, community education and awareness building, specifically around the needs for affordable housing and the different types of housing, intentional collaborations, zoning changes, zoning reform interchangeably used, and creating a housing trust fund were some other solutions or action steps to consider. So that was really it for the stakeholder workshops. Any questions thus far from the first half? No? Excellent. All right, so now we're going to move into the public forum data. What you're going to see here is I'm going to start off with the large group data with our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, or SWOT analysis data. And then we're going to dive into some of the 5-table discussions and questions there that individually people responded to. So the public forum back on January 9th, it started about 5:30. We had this at the McLean County Health Department building right across the street. And so we started off with a brief presentation on what the Regional Housing Recovery Plan is, what we're trying to do, why affordable housing matters, why housing matters, just laying down the basics. And then we really kind of from there segued into our SWOT analysis. So basically in the large group there, we asked people, simply raise your hands. What are some strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats really regarding housing or accessing housing in McLean County? So we try to keep it pretty flexible. And so go ahead, next slide. And then you're going to see just some pictures here from the second half. When I'm referring to the small table discussions, the second half after we did our SWOT analysis, we encourage everybody to get up out of the chair, go to different tables. There were 5 different tables with 5 different questions, ranging from who can and cannot afford to live in the county, what are some housing needs and solutions you'd like to see. And so what you're going to see here are the different questions as we kind of go through the data, but you can see how people would contribute writing on a sticky note. And we also had a table facilitator at each of the tables to engage in dialogue so that it was a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more just productive. And so the facilitators there were really encouraging people, answering questions if people were stuck. The facilitators were there to help. And then you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, Fran did a great job on facilitating our Zoom participation. So I was really, really happy and proud that we were able to do both at the same time. I thought it went really well. So now we're going to start seeing some of the results from the input. Again, this is from a public forum. As I did with the steering committee, I'll share with you both. Know that you're 2 different audiences. This is a public forum, so again, people who are just living in the community, working in the community, may not have as much exposure in housing terminology and whatnot. So the 2 main strengths related to housing in some capacity in McLean County, the number 1 was community character. So just having a historic downtown, caring individuals, having that collaborative atmosphere of the Twin Cities came up a lot, and an active public different festivals, just kind of having that camaraderie ship and that community character related to just cohesiveness. And then nonprofit organizations, that was just really the mere existence of affordable housing providers, tenant protection and legal services like Priority State. And so those were your 2 most frequent strengths. Again, you're going to see a lot of this data has been coded, so you're seeing what's common versus individual responses. Weaknesses, definitely at 40%, your most frequent weakness was just an overall lack of affordable housing and housing diversity. So it's very, very closely connected, but there is, believe it or not, a housing typology beyond just your single family home and your multifamily. It's your duplexes, your triplexes, things that are not really out there, but would be new. And then lack of intergovernmental coordination and incentive programs. So that
necessarily just means that there's a need to strengthen them. And we know that there's a lot of intergovernmental coordination happening, but maybe strengthening that is another weakness or another thought. Opportunities in McLean County. So we are looking at what are the current opportunities or potential opportunities that different communities, different municipalities can really tap into in the county. So your number one was just renovating the current and vacant housing stock. So we have a lot of homes that are quite old. I think I was just reading earlier, but three quarters of our housing stock in the county is older than 2000. And about half of it is before 1960. So built rather before those periods. So knowing that we have a really high aging housing stock was really quite commonly referred to. And then promoting tenants' rights. So just making sure tenants are aware of what protections they have. And then rent control and regulation came up a lot. Anecdotally, we know that there's a lot of challenges with that. But the fact is we had that came up as a potential opportunity. Threats in McLean County. So these are things that are going to impede or really are a challenge to addressing affordable housing and housing solutions. So what's going to really be a challenge there? And so your top two were lack of housing supply, just an overall lack of supply. I mean, it's just that general. And having a competitive home buying market, right? So those who may have lived here locally for a long time and can't really tap into the home market because it's so ruthless and it's too competitive to the point where only certain people can take advantage of that. And then high upfront reoccurring rental costs. We've been working with our Housing Assistance Coalition that we've been a part of since the beginning. This topic has come up a lot. So a lot of property owners, landlords, owners have charged a lot upfront and mandated a lot upfront from credit requirements to 2, even 3 months of rent upfront for their down, as well as their down deposit rather, as well as high application costs of $100 or more. Again, that money being down the drain if they don't have certain requirements or can't come up with the money. So just those two really kind of show on the community and what were two of the more frequent threats there. So now we're going to move on to the second half here. This is the small table discussions that I showed you earlier. The first question is, and question 1 is the only question with a part A and part B. So your part A is who can afford to live in the county? When we coded the data, we saw that higher income, dual income households, as no surprise, was your most frequent response. Your sample of, can you move that down a little bit? With the total response. 16. So again, knowing that that was what people responded with, again, gives that perception some solidity. So, and then question 1B, who cannot afford to live in McLean County? Low income, minimum wage household incomes, or households rather, were definitely the most frequent response with a total sample of about 33 people or 33 different responses. And then of course, fixed incomes and students, young professionals, young people, that was kind of in your second tier in terms of frequency of answers. So what housing issues in your community are important to you? So we have our top 3 here, and I'm going to unpack this a tiny bit. High rental housing prices and landlords' predatory pricing. Second one being lack of housing typologies and need for zoning reform. And then the third one being lack of transitional supportive housing. So, similar, I said to the steering committee, there's a lot here. We've grouped a lot, but the thing I will note is the top 2 are very much related within their respective brackets. So obviously with a high rental demand and even with a very ruthless rental market, that has allowed landlords rightfully and understandably to be a bit more choosy. But of course that has really made predatory pricing much more prevalent. And then we also have the need for zoning reform, which can only would support increasing different types of housing, like duplexes, triplexes of the sort. And then lack of transitional and supportive housing. Yes, there are 2 different terms, but they're both centered on housing typically more vulnerable populations, such as homeless and high at risk individuals. Question 3, can you identify housing solutions in your community that are important to you? Right, so zoning reform is going to be coming up a lot in the next few questions. You'll see it.
And even though we're not typically referring to issues, it still came up organically. So that is a key takeaway for the plan to consider. So the zoning reform, about 30% of the total responses, which was about a 65 sample size there, mentioned zoning reform in some capacity. Incentives for developers and landlords was second, which interestingly enough also kind of correlates with what we saw at the stakeholder workshop data, and then redevelopment of empty lots and the land trust model as well. How can local policymakers promote diversity, equity, inclusion for affordable housing, right? How can we further help those who probably need the most help? And then that would be focusing on a specific group or need, eliminating barriers to renting and buying, and addressing zoning reform. And you can see here we had a lot of different variety of responses here, but those were your top 3. And this is your last question. What are some we can statements that our community commit to? And our total response rate here was about 60 individual responses. Before I kind of go into this, this was meant to end the kind of the forum formally on a more positive note. What are some things that people would like to see? What are things that we want to commit to in some capacity? And just offering incentives. That's, again, developers, landlords, just incentivizing further affordable housing, increasing affordable housing, and then increasing collaboration between key groups. Really, all 3 of those kind of really get to where the commitment is and where the interest is to make that commitment. So we have other ones. Zoning reform, again, comes up for we can, and then renter protections and other housing solutions as well. And I think that's it. Thank you all for your attention. Any questions? No, I've thrown a lot at you.
Mark?
No?
Thank you, Mark.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Jennifer, you're next up on the agenda with the Human Services Transportation Plan update.
I'm told I have 5 minutes, so I'm actually starting the clock. Because God forbid I should
We got the hook ready.
people always do, but it's my turn. We have for 15 years been involved in a statewide project called the Human Services Transportation Plan.
I'm sorry. Can I just want to make sure people on the screen, can you hear us okay? Or Jen, okay? Stan, can you hear?
I'm just going to go ahead. I'll try and speak up.
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So as I said, 15 years we've been involved in this program, which was invented by Congress back in 2007 and went into effect in Illinois in 2009. We were originally operating as a group of counties under the management of Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, but we took it away from it for our region in 2010 and received the contract from IDOT. Our counties include Livingston, Iroquois, Kankakee, Ford, and us. We used to have Grundy County, but that got taken away too, so we were okay with that. So what does this mean? What does human service transportation mean? Basically, it's any sort of transportation activity that's intended to either for the general public or for agencies that want to serve their clientele or their neighborhoods or some other variant for people who have, people with disabilities, seniors is a common description, people with low incomes, and then other transit-dependent populations, including zero vehicle households, veterans, and minorities. Veterans have been a particular interest of our group, going back to about 2012 when we started analyzing the veterans populations in the rural areas of all the counties. And basically, in McLean and Kankakee counties, this is just for the rural parts of those counties, and the other 3, it's for all of them. This was applied to public transit, but also to what are called 5310 recipient agencies, which is jargon. 5310 is the section of the U.S. code that goes to this program. And recipient agencies can be senior centers, it can be nursing homes to some extent, it can be residential situations or others for people with disabilities of various kinds. And the list sort of goes on and on. So we have lots and lots of mostly non-for-profit agencies that are engaged in this. And we've worked with them extensively over the last 15 years. We are in Region 6, and I just mentioned which counties that was. And as I said, we sort of took it over in 2010. What do we do? Why is this an operation? Going back to Congress in 2007, it's to fund rural public transit and local organizations running transportation programs as equitably and efficiently as possible. There have been a lot of theories as to how that might work. We tried some of them, not so much, so we move on. It's an emphasis on coordination among the service providers. So again, public transit, but also the independent programs run by agencies. And basically that encompasses all of these 5310 federally funded agencies. In Illinois, what that means is that those funds are pretty much directed towards the purchase of vehicles. And so they've just announced the results of a 22 grant round. So that means for some of these agencies, they want minivans because they're manageable. Others who have larger populations, and of course, public transit, need actual buses that can accommodate anywhere from 15 to 22 people. All of these are outfitted with accessibility features. So ramps or lifts for wheelchairs or people who are not steady on their feet, wheelchair securements in the vehicle, a whole assortment of accessories that essentially make it possible for people to use these. So that's sort of the major expenditure of the funding, and individual agencies, in order to put these vehicles on the road, have to be able to cover gas and maintenance and all the rest of it. There are all kinds of requirements on those agencies. The rural public transit situation here in Region 6 is entirely operated by Showbus, which operates in 9 counties, including our 5. And it's an enormous task they take on, and they do an extraordinary job. What we are doing currently is developing or updating a regional coordination plan, which is required under the agreement. Oh dear, it's telling me I'm done. I didn't realize I would talk to my watch. And now it's going to yell at me. So just to sort of get into that very quickly, we are completing a draft for this updated plan. And in support of that effort, we've just launched, and I have to say that Tanya and Francesca have just launched a very wide scale public survey, both of providers, but also of just the general public. What do you need? Why do you need it? What are your needs? That kind of thing. And that the results of that will be incorporated into the final plan. And that will be, we hope to have that done by sometime in March and be able to take it to a regional committee. Each region has a policy committee and a technical committee. So we'll go to them for review and approval later in the spring. We're also, over the next couple of weeks, 3 weeks, I guess, doing reviews of the programs we know that exist. So agencies around the region that have vehicles that use them for these various purposes. We go and look at their paperwork and make sure that they're in compliance with the requirements of, again, the federal program in terms of how they keep records and how they maintain the vehicles and all the rest of it. And then in the most sort of unusual part of this, we coordinators go out and inspect vehicles, which I have to tell you is mostly do things that go click, work properly, and can you actually turn the headlights on, that kind of thing. Nobody's looking at the engines, trust me on this. But we do check the brakes. No, we don't move them. They park and we check all, we check the tire depth and all that other nonsense. There's a very long checklist, and we also have to make sure that all of the stickers that say provided by the Illinois Department of Transportation are in the proper places. So that's a feature that we've always kind of wondered about. But believe me, there are more qualified people doing serious inspections of these vehicles. But somehow the state decided we should get retired. So we'll be back to you when those things are done, and we can show you a completed plan and talk about what comes up next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ray, Vision Zero.
Yeah, really quick. We have the request for proposal, the RFP for the race plan, the Veterans Parkway Corridor Plan, ready to go to our legal for their review, and then immediately after that we'll publish it and then try to get responses from the consultants. And I think we have some interest around that, so I think that's a good sign, because given so much money out there, so many projects that they can pick, but I think there's some consulting firms kind of looking into helping on this project, so we'll see. That's really quick. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Ray on Vision Zero? All right. Bylaws?
Yeah, bylaws, every 3 years, by the bylaws, provisions in the bylaws, we'll do a review every 3 years. So this is that time of the 3 years. And if you all have a copy that I email you. If you take a look, based on what you know, what you see, your experience on different things, if you have some suggestions, please email me, maybe by the end of next week. So what we do is we'll consider those changes. We'll think about it staff level, and then we'll take it to the executive committee of the Regional Planning Commission, and then with the recommendation, then we'll take it to you all. And so we try to do that during this month of February. So yeah, just FYI, and let me know if you have questions.
Is there a standard template for Regional Planning Commission bylaws?
Not that I have seen. I've seen some other regional planning commissions, and this was the one that we have actually when I came in 2000. I have to navigate the process for the 2021 version, which is the current. And then I look at, I think it was Vishal, my predecessor, who took the previous review, and I think she was the one, and you might know this too, the one who created or drafted original.
She really updated our regional planning, our bylaws
Yeah.
in the last go around. So
Yeah. Because even the RPCs, in the country, let alone in the States, the functions are different. For example, Champaign County RPC, Regional Planning Commission, they do a lot of kind of social service type stuff that we don't do. So each RPC have their own kind of unique functions. And so, but I think having worked with different bylaws of like even Municipal Planning Commission, Historic Preservation, Economic Development, our bylaws is pretty good because it basically supposed to govern the operating functions of the commission. So yeah, we're open to suggestions if you see anything that should be further refined.
Okay. Next, future presentations, which I just wanted to bring up in terms of today. We had Billy at our meeting and looking for ideas, suggestions about future presentations that we ought to have as part of our meeting, so that we all stay abreast to the major things that are happening in our community and such. So please feel free to shoot me those suggestions when you get a few minutes. If there's something that your individual companies are doing that you think that impact the larger community and how we plan for things. If you'd like to bring those up or suggest those, that would be more than welcome. So, okay. Great. And then finally, we do have a topic for that which may arise. You want to talk about the change?
I have two things. As Mark, the part of his presentation about the regional recovery, the housing plan, right, that is ongoing. And because it's grant funded by the state, and so the plan has to be done by the end, has to be adopted by the end of March. And so what staff is requesting, because this has to be, the document has to be approved by you all, the Regional Planning Commission. So we're requesting that if okay with you all, that we move the April meeting at the first week of April to like 1 week prior, to the last week of March, which is the 5th week kind of thing. So if it's okay with you all that it would fit with the planning schedule for the housing plan. It meets the grant requirements, and then you won't have to meet in April. So
Well, and of course, the alternative is that
wasn't gonna be there anyway.
yeah, the alternative we have is that we force staff to have to work in burden midnight oil to get
Right.
things done by our beginning of March and such, which is putting, I think, an undue burden. So if that's agreeable, we'll go ahead.
The last week of March.
Yes.
yeah, and I'll email you all and poll like
Yeah.
which date would work for you. We still looking at 4:00, but it's like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, probably not Mondays or Fridays.
Yeah.
But I'll pull your with pull your for your preference day. Good.
And that
Thank you.
requires you to notify the other appropriate people that we're changing the date, right?
Yeah, once you all decided, okay, what's your preferred date, then we'll, we'll. Yeah, and then one more thing, if I may, one last thing, we are recruiting an assistant planner, because the current vacancy, formerly occupied by Tanya Barretto, who has been promoted to be the committee planner. And so to move out, got a little bit more money, but then we have to recruit for planner one position, and we start taking applications. The due date for application is like the Friday before the President's Day, so it's like end of next week. Yeah, but FYI. So we've been kind of operating kind of short staff, and then given a couple of planners also kind of recovering from sickness recently, and we have a lot of deadlines. And if you saw the presentations, we have so much going on, let alone working on budget for IDOT for the new state fiscal year 25. So we have a lot of things going on, but we are thanking for all the staff working hard, including Katie on the screen behind the scene. But we just FYI, thank you again for all the support.
Good. So if you have anyone to suggest to Ray, please
Yes.
get that to him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Any interest too, if you do have some graduate students.
That completes our agenda. Is there any other topics that need to come from the commissioners? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Bart. Second? Thank you, Rory. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. You're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.